Hello everyone. Today I have another new guest. He is actually from USA, but now he lives in Australia. He is a global citizen. He has a lot of experience. He visits many countries with his religious jobs and many interesting activities. And most importantly, he has very good family and he's a very nice man. So can you please introduce yourself with our audience?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Sharif. My name is Shahe Gergian, and as Sharif indicated, I'm currently staying in Australia with my wonderful family. I appreciate that very much. And we're currently working here. We sort of got trapped here a little bit during the lockdowns as a result of the pandemic, but we've been enjoying our time here, and I'm very happy to be with you tonight.
Mhm. Thank you. Like one important point, like you want to discuss with our audience about the global citizenships, about the global perspective, and I know that you visit different countries and you have different experience and different point of views, and you have a most important thing, you know, different culture. So how it actually helps you to grow yourself, even grow your perspective and many positive approach. Yeah.
Sure, yeah. So my job is basically I'm a preacher, or you might call it a missionary, and I work with churches all across the world to teach people the Bible. That's basically my job. I'm sort of an educator in that respect. And doing that for the last several years has given me a tremendous number of opportunities to visit countries in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, and in Australia. And of course, I've toured around the United States extensively as well. And it's given me opportunities to encounter, of course, a great number of people. And I think most people who have done the kind of traveling that I've done or that you have done, Sharif, can really testify to the fact that the more people you encounter from the more diverse backgrounds, cultures, and even religious faiths, the more it enables you to have a better understanding, a better perspective about the world. We're living in a time, I think, I fear, of increased selfishness all across the world. We see that here recently during this global pandemic by the fact that the richest members of the world community have become far exceedingly more rich at a time when many people are struggling. So there seems to be something that's not quite right there in the way that we balance our priorities. And even politically, over the last number of years, we've seen the frightening rise of nationalism, where countries are having a more isolationist and selfish approach, removing themselves from the global community in many respects. And that can have a very detrimental harm to the population of those countries and the population of the world. And so I want to share with your audience tonight that there's a great need to reject that kind of introspection or inversion. And that when you have opportunities to travel and to get to know different people and different cultures, it makes you a better person. It gives you a better perspective in life in a number of ways that perhaps we can discuss and explore in our conversation tonight.
Yes. Besides that, at present situation, we have lot of challenges, especially COVID-19 period. You also stuck with your family in Australia, and many things happening. What you understand? Why we facing too much of challenges, and what will be the future next 2 3 years? What will happen? What's your understanding?
Well, if I could tell you the future, the next 2, 3 years, I could make a lot of money as a prophet. But obviously, my guess is as good as anyone's. I didn't know 6 months before today that I was going to be here in Australia during this time. My family and I came here. We were staying in Malaysia, and we came here in early March just to visit for 2 weeks. And then the pandemic grew out of control in Malaysia and Australia. Both countries closed their borders, and Malaysia's borders are still closed, as are Australia's and a number of other countries. So knowing the future is anyone's guess at this point. Planning seems to be something that is archaic and obsolete in the year 2020. Now, how we've come to the place where we are now, there might be a lot of factors and reasons behind that. Certainly, I think part of the problem with the pandemic is that many countries didn't take it seriously early enough. maybe thought it was just a Chinese problem, something that was isolated in one region of China. But the world is more interconnected now than it's ever been. And it was only a matter of time before it left China and spread across Asia and to other continents as well. And now we see 5 million confirmed COVID-19 cases in the United States, in my home country, which is just, such a disturbing and saddening number. So I think that early on, if maybe countries had done a little bit better job of trying to work with China to understand the true nature of this virus and how easily it spread, maybe we would have been in a better position now than we are currently in.
Yeah, yes, this is very interesting, and even I think this is very good opportunity for many people that we can build up the global community and global things. Beside that, I want to know that especially you from USA, and USA also facing a lot of, not only US, actually many countries facing challenges in that COVID-19 period. So what the issue, how we can overcome from this situation? What's your advice? Because you have a very diversified knowledge, so how we can take different kind of initiative from the civil society or from the our own community.
Well, I'm not a medical expert, so I can't give advice as to how best to confront this challenge from a medical perspective. But if you want to talk about how to have a global perspective and how that improves lives, there may be at least two factors here that could help pertaining to the current pandemic. Number one, and this is a bit of encouraging news, what we're seeing across the globe with this concentrated effort by doctors and other medical professors and professionals and researchers and scientists towards the effort of finding a vaccine. And there's some very promising reporting saying that maybe even by the end of this year, 2020, there could be a vaccine that could be made available to people. That is very encouraging news. We've seen the whole world come together towards this one concentrated effort to find a vaccine and to make it available to the masses. That's very encouraging to me, to see so many people cooperatively working towards that end. Now, the second is much more difficult. The second is how to get countries to look at some of the best practices that have been instituted in other countries and adopt those practices. So maybe that's looking to South Korea, who has a very robust contact tracing program. Or maybe that's looking to Australia, who, even though in many parts of the country there are almost no COVID-19 cases anymore, they have restricted travel between the different states so that the cases that exist in the eastern states don't spread out here where I am to Western Australia. We can look at New Zealand and other countries that have just done a fantastic job of fighting the spread of the virus and learn from those successes. And then also we need to learn from the mistakes that have been made. So there's a whole debate now in my country, in the United States, about the efficacy of mask wearing. Is mask wearing really a good way to keep yourself from contracting the virus or spreading the virus? And lots of studies have been done to indicate, yes, that wearing masks is a good thing. I think I heard in Malaysia now, and you can confirm this, that they're now requiring everyone to wear a mask when they go out in public. Is that correct?
No, they have to wearing mask. They have to wear mask.
Yeah.
In Malaysia, even those who are not wearing mask, I think they get penalty and this kind of things. Yeah.
Right. So there may be all kinds of best practices that are being done in certain places around the world that countries who are not doing so well in fighting the virus can look to and say, okay, this has worked in other places. Maybe we should try this here too. But again, in order for that to happen, Sharif, people have to have a truly global perspective, to look beyond ourselves and thinking we always know what's best, we always will make the right decision, and we always know which road to take. That's not always the case. In fact, I have learned that many times I did not know what the best practice was of this or that. And I had to learn. So we have to be students of each other so that we can absorb the knowledge that all of us bring to the table. You and I, we have very different backgrounds. We have very different educational backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. But anytime that we get together is a time for us to learn from each other. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
No, I understand. This is very interesting thing that even when we meet together, we discuss together, we try to learn many things together. And one important aspect I just want to know, like how like there are many economical challenges every country is now facing, every countries, even every
Right.
organization, they have economical challenges and everything. From your global perspective, how we can solve at least few of the economical challenges? Do you have any solution? Do you think anything positive, how we can work together on that particular point?
Well, again, just like I'm not a medical professional, I'm not an economist. And so there may be a number of answers to your question that would be far beyond my ability to even entertain. It looks like, a number of countries are trying a number of different options. Here in Australia, as well as in my home country of the United States, they've attempted maybe sending stimulus money to directly from the government to the citizenry to help them to pay some of their expenses. In the United States, the real issue has been job loss. Because of the lockdown and because of other factors, a lot of people have simply lost their jobs. And now that the states and much of the country is opening back up, some of those jobs are returning. So I think there will be a natural rebound in the economy, at least in the United States, as things begin to reopen. But as things begin to reopen, then the virus spreads worse. And so you might have to slow down or backtrack and close things again. And you have this ebb and flow. You think about global travel, which may be something that we talk about in this call as well. Global travel, there's an Australian travel organization that estimated that global travel may not return to the pre-COVID-19 numbers until maybe the year 2024, which is another 4 years from now. So obviously the travel industry, the airlines, the cruise industry, these industries in particular have been hit very hard. And governments, I imagine, will have to step in to save what they can from going under, because the world economy now depends on the ease and cost effectiveness of travel to be able to go from one country to another.
Yes. Okay. One thing, like beside vaccine, beside healthcare and other things, that you are also working for developing people perspective, values, and many more things. How do you want to do social research, and what your perspective about human values and the human behaviors, and how do you think? What happening right now? Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's a question that's much more in my wheelhouse.
Yes. Yes.
And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that, because I think that's a vital challenge in the world today. It's interesting that as the internet has developed and global communication has become so ubiquitous. I mean, here we are right now. I'm in Western Australia, you're in Malaysia, and in real time, we're able to see each other, to talk to each other, and even to broadcast this conversation to the internet for billions of people to watch, were they so inclined to do that. Even though global communication, thanks to the internet, has become so ubiquitous, so easy, in many respects, people have become more isolated than ever. And there's a swath of research to back up this idea that people are lonelier now than at any other time when that kind of statistic has been measured, at least in the last few generations. People are more isolated. People tend to cut themselves off from the outside world and to look inward. And in America, in our political environment, we have something that's been coined as tribalism. And that's the idea that I have my team, you have your team, and all my team cares about is defeating your team. So I saw that a few weeks ago you interviewed some people from the Transhumanist Party, and was very interested about some of the things that they were discussing. But one of the things that you talked to them about was how they are much more policy driven than politically driven. And the major parties in the United States have moved away from policy to just politicking. And so it's this tribal warfare. It's this us against them. And this has been only harmful to the American political process. It's been harmful to society at large. Americans are more depressed. They're more dependent on prescription drugs than ever before. Drug addiction is at an all-time high. Alcohol dependency is at an all-time high. And much of this, I think, in my perception of how the world has gone over these last years, can be traced back to this idea that we have gone inward when we should be going outward. We have become more selfish, and we just apparently don't seem to care. People don't seem to care anymore about others. And so my job as a Christian teacher, as a Bible teacher, is to impart some of the great truths of the scripture, of the Bible, that Jesus teaches us that we ought to live lives of selflessness. And this is, I think, a great principle, universal even to those who may not be Christians, that when we only think about ourselves, that means we only have ourselves to rely on. And so if we get in trouble, there's nobody else there to help us. But the Bible teaches us that we ought to live as a community. And when you and I are always looking out for each other, when we're looking outward instead of inward, suddenly we have opened ourselves to being benefited and blessed and helped by all the people that we have brought into our lives. So in my travels, I've had opportunity to meet all kinds of people all over the world, of all different backgrounds, people who I know will help me if I need them. I can depend on them, and they will build me up and lift me up. And so together we work cooperatively towards whatever goal it is that we're aspiring to achieve. And I think that's what we have to get to. We have to abandon this idea that it's us versus everybody else, my country versus everybody else's country, and revitalize the idea of community and of teamwork and of helping one another. And these are principles that I think are human principles, not just Christian principles or Muslim principles. These are human principles that have benefited society whenever they have been put into place. The World Bank says that since 1990, when globalization really started, free trade started to be promoted around the world, 35% of the world has been lifted out of abject poverty. That's over 1 billion people. And so you think about what an amazing accomplishment that has been for the whole human race. And if we think about it in those terms, if we think about what we can be doing to benefit the people who are immediately around us in our community, and how that can then grow our neighborhoods and our countries and the global society that we're a part of, I think then we'll be much more headed in the right direction, the direction where we need to be.
Yes, one important point. Even I'm from a developing nations, let's say from Bangladesh. Even we are trying to interact with them, American society, European society, and different society as well. One point that really every country we are missing good policy for better human, good policy for healthcare system, policy for education systems. We are making a billions and $trillion industries, a big budget, and many things, but we never focus on how we can taking care of human beings. Even now, every country actually suffering, except even, yes, I want to say Malaysia also doing good, maybe Australia also doing good, maybe Vietnam, Taiwan, German, different kind of New Zealand, this kind of country, they're doing good. But beside that, there are many big country, big economy, big corporations. Why are we missing our valuable healthcare systems, our valuable educational system? What's the challenges? What's the problem? Can you explain? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very difficult and nuanced challenge. I'm from a country, one of the few developed countries in the world that has really struggled with the healthcare piece of this discussion. And there's been a long-standing debate in America about healthcare policy. Should it be more privately run by businesses and private companies, or should the government have more involvement in managing and guaranteeing healthcare for its citizens? So I'm currently in Australia. Australia, like many Western European countries, like New Zealand, they have a national healthcare system. Malaysia has a national healthcare system that is sponsored by the government and in part managed by the government. And these countries have done that because they see that there is a need for every member of society to have access to affordable healthcare. But America has struggled with this debate for a long time in deciding which path is the best to pursue. And I think at the root of part of the problem here is, again, exactly what you have said. It's a failure to really prioritize the needs of individuals, the needs of every single member of society. Sometimes, especially in large countries like the United States, we have this tendency to look at everything from a national perspective. And we forget that the national perspective is a perspective that's made up of individual people. And I have medical needs. My wife might have medical needs. Our children might have medical needs. People need health care. And until we figure out a solution that prioritizes those needs above maybe profit or other factors that might come into play, then we're always going to struggle with how best to handle that healthcare system. You know, in my travels, when I've gone to countries where they have robust national socialized healthcare systems, like here in Australia, people are very satisfied with it. They're happy with it. They like it, and they think it's a good system, a system that works for them. So again, this is exactly what we talked about earlier. Countries like Bangladesh and America, now Bangladesh and America are very different countries, but both of them can benefit from looking at other models in other places that have succeeded and having that global perspective of saying, okay, here's something that has worked in Canada, or here's something that's worked in Australia. Maybe this is something that we can adopt for ourselves, something that we can implement and try for a time and see if it works for us. But again, I think that so many governments really believe that they have the best solution already and they don't need anybody else's input or advice. I'm reminded of one of ancient history's most powerful and prominent empires, the Roman Empire. One of the reasons the ancient Roman Empire was so successful and so long-lasting was because when the Romans added new countries, new territories, and new people groups to their kingdom, they learned from them. They adopted whatever best practices they saw in those places, and they made them the normative practice across their kingdom. So the Romans, who had the greatest army in the world and who had maybe one of the best political systems in the ancient world and governing all of their different territories, they were not too conceited or narcissistic to realize that other people might have something beneficial to offer them. And they were open to the idea that they could learn from others. So for us, we have to sometimes step back and we have to not think so highly of ourselves that we always have everything in life figured out, and look around and say, okay, other people are doing things and they're doing it really well. How can I learn from their success?
Yes, yes. This is very important, and another important things I want to share. Like example, now how actually capitalization, business, and other things they are growing and growing. On the other hand, much people they're losing their hope, losing their valuable resources and everything. And also we find that in this COVID period, I think many people actually, I want to say, losing money and losing economical aspects, and many things may be changed next few years. So
Yeah.
how do you think, what will be the hope for this mass community? I do not want to think only about the big name and the big corporations and other
Sure,
things. Yes,
sure.
I want to think more about the mass community, the
Yeah.
people, how, yeah.
Well, I think there may be some promising signs about that, Sharif. And I think that one of the things that this global pandemic has taught us is how precious life is and how difficult some people have it in life. And so, what we've seen, for example, in the United States with the economic damage the pandemic has brought, not to mention, of course, the horrible loss of life and the strain on our healthcare system, but the economic damage has made us realize how many people are living what we have a saying called living paycheck to paycheck. That
Mhm.
refers to a class of people who are not able to save money. They're not able to set anything aside for emergency funds or anything like that. All they do is when they get paid at the end of the week or the end of the month, every single dollar they've made goes immediately to their expenses. And of course, I know this is the norm for most people in developing countries, but in America, one of the things that has sustained the growth of our economy is the idea that people have been able to accumulate wealth over time and then even pass that wealth on to their children to give their children a head start. And then that generational wealth increases over time. But what has been exposed in this pandemic and the economic toll that it's taken is that many Americans have not been successful in their ability to do that anymore. Another thing that I think has been highlighted during all of this is how our educational systems need to adapt to our modern times. So you have this pandemic rush on the scene, and now all of a sudden schools had to close, and educators had to shift from doing traditional in-class teaching to doing more hybrid online educational programs. So I think these two things, the fact that many Americans are struggling much more than we thought before, and perhaps this is true in other countries as well, and that education needs to change are, in my opinion, these are promising signs for the future, because I think this has awoken at least the American conscience to the fact that we have a great wealth disparity in the United States, where the wealthiest top earners have hoarded all of the great wealth of America for themselves, and many people have been left behind. And I'm hopeful that our political leaders will realize that there's something that needs to be done about that now that it's been exposed because of COVID-19, and will try to move towards methods for fixing that disparity. But secondly, I'm hoping that something good comes out of all of this as far as how we conduct our educational systems. I'm not sure how it is in Malaysia or Bangladesh, but in the United States over the past few decades, since the time when I was in college, the American education system at the university level has grown so outrageously expensive that many Americans cannot afford to go to a university anymore. And it's created a barrier for many people who come from lower class families to be able to then get the education that they need and advance and achieve in the life that they want to advance and achieve in. So I'm hopeful that this has taught us that there are some really needful updates we need to make to our educational system. And I think moving more education to online systems, figuring out better ways to do online education. I'm not sure if you've ever taken an online university class before. I have, and they're not very enjoyable. I find it difficult to stay engaged, to stay on top of the coursework. Much harder for me to do an online class than it was to do a class in person. And so I'm hoping that educators now view this as a great time to have a great renaissance in the way that we conduct education. And if we make education more robust and online, we might be able to open doors of opportunity to people who could not otherwise afford a university degree. And as we grow the world in education standards, then of course we know what will follow. People will have more education, and they'll be able to achieve more. They'll be able to accomplish more. Technology will advance better. Science will advance better, and the world will be better for it. Just as it was in the post-war era in the United States. After World War II, the American soldiers came home from Asia and Europe where they had been fighting, and America had something called the GI Bill. And the GI Bill basically said, we're going to bring all of our soldiers home from war, and we're going to pay for them to go to college so that they can earn a degree and get a good paying job. And that really was one of the great impetuses for the huge economic expansion of the 20th century, the mid to late 20th century in the United States. America paid for this whole generation of young men to go to school, to go to university, and it just it's having tremendous impact even today, 80 years later. So I'm really hopeful that this will be a time for our education systems to be revitalized and improved and made more affordable for people.
Yes, this is very interesting because education is very important, and actually I want to say actually now people paying a lot of money for educations, but I don't know what's the outcome and other things. This is also a very vital point. Besides that, I want to know, because you have a very good experience in Asia Pacific and you from USA, like there is a little bit of tension in between US and China relationship.
Right.
From your neutral point of view, what's the real scenario? What you are observing right now? Yeah.
Well, as an American, I'm not sure how neutral I can be, but
Yeah.
you know, it's difficult to know. The U.S.-China relationship is very complex. It has been complex for decades, and I think a lot of it has to do with the dramatically different political systems that dominate those two countries. So here you have the top two economies of the world. And one of them is the oldest democratic republic, constitutional democratic republic in the world. That's the United States. And another one is a communist one-party system. And that ideological difference is always going to be a barrier to U.S.-China relationship, I think. And so right now, you know, you have a whole complex range of issues. Of course, there's all sorts of uncertainty about the early days of the virus. The United States is blaming China for not revealing enough information about the coronavirus in those early months. I don't know if any of that is valid or not. We see, you know, very, very questionable issues pertaining to human rights coming out of China that are very worrisome. And so this tension, you know, the old theory used to be that as long as countries were trading with each other and making money off of each other, that everything was going to be okay and war would be averted. And I think in a lot of cases that's probably true. But I think that right now the U.S. and China are just using each other to play the blame game. It's convenient for American politicians to say, well, all of our problems that we're having are because of China. And it's probably equally convenient for Chinese politicians to say, no, America is really the source of all of the problems in the world and we're the solution. So politically, I think both countries are looking for a good punching bag. It's easy to beat up on China for Americans. It's easy to beat up on Americans for the Chinese. And that's kind of the stalemate that we're in. But I think that probably at some point cooler heads will prevail, and hopefully we'll make sure we don't, you know, escalate the tension and ratchet up the caustic strife too high, and we can just back off and say, you know, having the dynamic trade relationship that our countries have had now for a long time has benefited everyone. It's benefited America, it's benefited China, it's benefited the world. It's grown the world economy. It's made goods and services cheaper. It's made the exchange of talent. It's opened up customer base. Of course, American companies always are going to want to do business in China because there's 1.5 billion people there. That's a lot of customers potentially for American companies. And so all of these are great economic benefits of having trade relationships. And I think that that will continue. I don't think that that relationship is going to end. It may alter over the years, but I think ultimately both of those countries depend on each other and want each other to do well economically because it benefits both countries.
Yes, as in Asia Pacific market, you visit a different country, you understand the economical perspective, and most important, you have many friends from different community. I want to know, like, how do you see the economic future of this Asia Pacific market? What's your understanding and observe,
Well,
like how you want to observe this economy?
yeah, that's a really interesting question because being in Australia actually has given me a whole new perspective about the dynamic of the Asia Pacific marketplace. Australia, of course, historically has its roots in connection to the United Kingdom and Western Europe, and for a long time, Australia saw itself as part of the West. It has a history and heritage connection to many Western countries. But in recent years, I think Australia has sort of opened its eyes to the fact that the countries that are closest to it are not America and Great Britain and Western Europe. It's the Asian countries. It's Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Laos, all of these countries in the Southeastern Asian corridor, and even, of course, China and India just beyond those countries. So Australia has really opened its eyes to the fact that the countries that are closest to it, the countries that should be prioritized in its trade outreach, are the ones that are its neighbors. And I think that's a great thing, that Australia is opening itself up to being part of the Asian community, because I think what we'll have is a wonderful cultural exchange in addition to the economic exchange. So Malaysia, of course, is a country that exports primarily palm oil to other Asian countries. And so Malaysia depends on a lot of imports. And I remember during our times when we would stay in Malaysia and we would go to the grocery stores, the markets, we would see a lot of goods from Australia, a lot of beef from Australia and other food products that were imported from Australia. So Australia really seems to be melding itself into this Asian market. And what I learned, and you can maybe confirm or deny this if it's not true, when I've been in Malaysia, is how many people from Malaysia want to come and study at Australian universities. There are lots of Malaysian restaurants here, lots of Indonesian and Malaysian immigrants here in Australia. So that exchange of cultures, of ideas, and of trade are really, I think, going to pay dividends in the future. And are going to benefit countries like Malaysia and benefit countries like Australia. You know, when you go to Perth, Perth is the big capital city of Western Australia. It's about 2.5 million people. It's a fairly sizable city. And you walk through the city of Perth, you see people from all sorts of places. You will encounter people from India and Pakistan, people from the Middle East, people from Southeast Asia, like Indonesia and Malaysia. And so it's already happening here in the Australia and Asia corridor, that this connection between these countries, they're building a community of countries that are only going to be a benefit to each other. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yes. This is very interesting analysis. Very interesting analysis. You try to relate education, healthcare systems, economical aspects, and other things. Beside that, I want to know the culture, because when you move different country, you find different cultures, different food, different values. How do you want to analyze the difference between USA and Asia Pacific culture?
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I've spent time in Europe, in Russia. I've been to Russia a number of times. I've been to the Middle East, to Cairo, Egypt. I've been to Bangladesh a few times. I love going to Bangladesh. The people of Bangladesh are some of my favorite people in all the world. I've been a few different places in Southeast Asia and Australia. Spent a little bit of time in New Zealand, and all of those things you mentioned are wonderfully diverse. You have beautiful architecture in all of these places that's all different. You go to Russia and you go to places in Moscow like the Red Square, and you see all of these old Russian Orthodox churches, a beautiful architecture. You go to a place like Cairo, and of course, you see all of the ancient wonders there that are just so beautiful. You go to a place like Malaysia, it has its own unique style, its own unique architecture. And so when you travel to different places, you get to encounter all of this unique beauty. My family and I, my wife and I, we love to go to museums. And every time we go to a new city, we try to go to at least one or two museums to understand more of the history of those places. When we've gone to Tokyo, we've gotten to go see some of the historical artifacts of the ancient Japanese culture, which is dramatically different than American culture or Malaysian culture or Australian culture. So you see all of these wonderful differences. Food, I love to eat. And I love to try new food. And I've never been to a country where I couldn't find something or didn't find something that I loved. I love Malaysian food. Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur is such a wonderful mixture of Malay, Chinese, Indian, and other cultures. And all of the foods are right next to each other. You can go to one shopping mall that has a restaurant for a half a dozen different cultures. And these are wonderful experiences. And anyone who's watching this program today, I hope that the main thing that I can really encourage you to do after we come out of this COVID-19 crisis is to save some money and to travel. Traveling is one of the most wonderful, uplifting, self-encouraging things that you can do to experience new places, new foods, new cultures. It really is one of my absolute most favorite things to do. But to really answer your question, Sharif, here's the main thing. The main thing that I have learned in going to all of these places is that human beings, no matter where they're from, are pretty much the same everywhere you go. Everybody is just trying to have a good life, to make a good life for their children, their family, to succeed in life, to maybe even grow and excel. People are trying to get educated. They're trying to stay healthy. They're trying to be part of their communities. Everywhere I've ever gone, I have experienced the same thing, and that is human beings just being human. And I think that is a wonderful thing because we make so much of the differences between us. You and I are very different people. We come from different religious backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. But I always enjoy seeing you and your wonderful wife and spending time with both of you. And I'm always enriched by that experience. I'm always enriched by being able to meet new people and experience new things. And the more I travel, the more I realize that people are pretty much the same everywhere you go, and that you can have a connection with people no matter what. So when I've gone to Bangladesh, for example, one of the things I love about the Bangladeshi people is that they love to laugh. Bangladeshi people love to laugh.
Yeah.
They love to tell jokes, to tell stories, and they have big laughs just like I do. And I think that's wonderful. I love that when I go to Bangladesh. And this is what I'm talking about. People are people no matter what. And I think that when the more you travel, the more you get exposed, the more you have a global perspective, the more it will enrich your life, the more it will help you psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and it only pays dividends. I would never ever want to take back the times that I have spent in other countries, meeting new people and experiencing new things.
Yes. Beside that, your experience, that Asia Pacific and this area, actually many young community, I think around 50% is youth, those who are under 30 years old. And now we have a challenging situations in terms of values, in terms of economies, many things happening. So what your advice for this youth community, how they grow themselves, how they can build themselves, how they can do something good for their community, for their family, for their country.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because in the time that I've spent in Kuala Lumpur, I have noticed that there's a lot of difference between the older generation and the younger generation. When I say the older generation, I mean the generation that was still alive when Malaysia earned independence in 1957. They maybe were young at that time, but they were born in that era, and that was an era of great hardship for Malaysia. The economy really struggled for a long time. People were generally very poor, very impoverished. Most of them were agrarian. They worked on farms or plantations of some kind, and they really struggled. And the younger generation in Kuala Lumpur, in particular, grew up a little more educated, a little more affluent. So there is a dramatic difference in Malaysia, where you have now this younger generation that's sort of the first generation to really get higher education and to start working in fields like technology, computers, manufacturing, engineering, other science fields. I've met many young people, and I mean young people, people who are under 50, under 40 years old in Malaysia, who have good education, who are working in maybe emerging fields or advanced fields, and there's a difference there. Now, as far as the values difference, there might be a lot of comments that we could make about that. Maybe some of those value differences are good and some aren't. The older generation, they seem to be much more frugal with their money. They're very conscientious about how they spend their money. They don't want to be wasteful. The younger generation, they tend to spend their money on maybe things that seem to be, to the older generation, a little bit more frivolous and not as needful. But I think by and large, what you're having right now in Kuala Lumpur in this younger generation is really an emerging society that, as they get older and as they grow, are going to take Kuala Lumpur, are going to take Malaysia to the next level. I mean, Malaysia is a very impressive country because these young people are educated and energetic, and they want the country to grow. They want for better things for their country, and I think that's very exciting. My advice, if I could am qualified at all to give any, is to continue to be focused, continue to be driven, but most importantly of all, don't fall into the trap that many of my fellow Americans have fallen into. Don't fall into the trap of becoming selfish or greedy. There's so much selfishness and greed in the world, and that has hurt many people. So all of these young people out there in Malaysia, and this would be true anywhere, who are doing well and succeeding, make sure you're thinking about other people too. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, but think about your community. I remember in Kuala Lumpur, I was in a lift one time in a large building, and in the lift, which is very common in Kuala Lumpur, there were some advertisements on the walls of the lift. And one of the advertisements talked about how life can be different when you move from the village to the big city. And in the village, and I've experienced this in places like Bangladesh, in the village, you have a sense of community. People know each other. They know they can depend on each other. They struggle together. And there's a wonderful sense of community in those places. But when you move to the big city, well, you might have more neighbors than you've ever had before if you live in an apartment building, especially. You might be surrounded by more people than ever before, but that sense of community is so often lost. So one of the things that we really tried to do when we were in Kuala Lumpur was to do what we could to promote that community. My wife is wonderful for many reasons, but just one of the reasons she's so wonderful is because she wanted to bring together a community of mothers and children in our little area in Kuala Lumpur. So she would get together with some of the other mothers who had children like our children, and they would get together and they would read stories together, they would play together, have activities together. And here you had children from families who were from America and the Middle East and different parts of Asia and the subcontinent, India, Pakistan, all together, all playing together, all reading stories together, learning together. So don't get so focused on your career. And I'm not saying that that's not a good thing, but don't get so focused on your career that you forget about what it means to be part of a community, to grow with your community, to look out for people who are in need, people who need help in your community. And this is one of, as I said earlier, one of the most foundational principles of the Bible, of the teachings of Jesus. Jesus was asked one time, which are the two most important rules of all? He said the first is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is just as important. It's to love your neighbor as yourself. And I think if everyone would live by those two rules, to love our God and to love our neighbor, we'll see a wonderful resurgence of community-style living and a global perspective that will help not only us, but the whole world.
This is interesting understanding about the different cultures, especially for the young community and for the different cultural people. Besides that, I love to learn from you. Like, there are different religious point of view. Let's say I'm from different religious point of view, you from different religious point of view. But all of the religious point of views, basic thing is, I think, honesty, sincerity, caring about peoples, and some of the very basic things. But why we have too much of chaos or anything? Why we cannot be like respect for each other? Why I always we think that I am the best, I know the best things, I'm following the best things? Why don't we respect each other? I do not find any basic huge difference in between even Muslim, even Jewish, and even Christianities and other things. But we have lot of difference, lot of problem. But what's your observation?
Well, I mean, obviously, there are many differences in the teachings of the religions that you've mentioned. There are many differences in how those religious systems try to draw close to God or try to improve their understanding of what it means to be a human being. And I don't want to conflate by saying all religions are the same, because I don't think that that's true. But
Okay.
I will say this. I will say this for sure. And I think you and I have had this conversation before. No matter your religious background, just a basic concept of being a human being is to show respect and care and concern for other human beings. That's just part of being a part of the human family. That's what we should always be doing. And so even though you and I might disagree about our personal religious convictions, it doesn't mean that I lose any sense of respect for you as a human being. As a Christian, I believe that all humans are made in the image of God, you just as much as me. And if we're all made in the image of God, that means that we're all precious in the sight of God. And each one of us has value and worth that is intrinsic. It's not earned or deserved. It's something that we have from birth. So I'm going to respect you, and I'm going to try to do my very best to be understanding and kind to you, because that's what Christianity teaches me to do. But even beyond that, that's just what it means to be a human. And there is a lot of demonizing in the world. And I think it goes back to our discussion where we talked about US-China relations. It's easy to look at people who are different and to say, those people are the problem. Those people are the problem. It's not my team, it's their team. And so we just cast off or ignore huge parts of the world's population because they're different from us, and we want to just demonize them and say, well, they're the problem. I think that kind of thinking, first of all, is foolish. Secondly, it's destructive. And third, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. It would be wrong, just as it would be wrong for you to say all Christians are the same and all Christians are part of the problem. It would be equally wrong for me to say all Muslims are the same and all Muslims are part of the problem. And I know better than that because I've been to a lot of different Muslim countries and I've met a lot of people who are very devoted practitioners of Islam. And people are different. People are different all over the world. So I think that if we approach life always believing that we're going to show people the basic level of human dignity and decency, just like we would want to be shown. Jesus one time gave the golden rule, which is a famous saying of Jesus, where he said, you treat others the way you also want to be treated. And if I want you to show me respect, I need to show that respect to you as well.
Yes, this is very interesting. Even I think from audience, they are commenting that excellent observations, because your observations actually our audience really find that it's very interesting. Okay, like this is very interesting aspect, and you have deeper understanding about different community. That is the things we can find from your conversations. So be a global citizen. How we become a better global citizen? How you want to share your experience? Yeah.
Sure. Well, as I said earlier, for me, one of the most important aspects of my life that have dramatically changed my global perspective has been being able to travel. Now, I know for some people that's not possible. Of course, right now with the coronavirus, it's almost impossible to travel anywhere. And even once the virus has abated and maybe a vaccine has been discovered and COVID-19 is a thing of the past, which I hope is going to happen very soon, some people, it's just not possible for them to travel because of the financial cost involved. But if it is possible, even if it's not, just to a neighboring country, if you live in Malaysia and you can take a trip to Vietnam or to Cambodia, if you can take a trip to places even maybe a little further than that, like to Indonesia or Korea or visit Australia, and you open yourself up to new experiences. The key to being a good traveler is to say, when I get there to wherever I'm going to accommodate myself to what they're doing. So when I go to Malaysia, I don't insist that everywhere I go, the only thing we eat is Western food. I'm going to try new food. I'm going to try new experiences. I'm going to be open to new experiences. And if you have that kind of open mind, you will be extremely benefited by your experiences in traveling to other countries and visiting other people. Now, if you can't travel and it's a financial barrier for you to be able to do so, I totally understand that. So my second recommendation would be to find good books that will teach you about other cultures. Just a recent example, I read a book. It was a biography of a man named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a German theologian. He was a Lutheran pastor and thinker who was born right around the turn of the 19th into the 20th century. He was a child, a young man during World War I. He came of age in post-World War I Germany, which was an economically ravished country after the war. And he and his family were part of the group of Germans who opposed the rise of National Socialism and the reign of Adolf Hitler. In fact, Bonhoeffer was part of a secret plot to assassinate Hitler. He tried to help have Hitler killed. And it was so fascinating to see life from this perspective in a part of the world where I didn't know much about, in Germany, in a time period that was very volatile, to be able to see the world through this man's eyes and to see that he experienced so many of the things that I've experienced, had some of the same challenges, some of the same anxieties. He had some of the same goals in life that I have. And so you're able to share through this kind of literature the experiences that other people have in places that are very different from you. I remember the first time I ever went to Russia, one of the first things one of the Russian people who I met asked me was how many books about Russia I had ever read. And I had to very sadly admit I had never read a book about Russia, which was, of course, a mistake for me. I'm going to go to Russia. I should know something about Russia before I go. So maybe you're in a situation where travel is not possible for you. I totally understand that. But if you can find books, good books, even books that are fiction, but that are based in other countries and at other times from your own experience, it will open your eyes. It will open you to new ideas, to new concepts, to new philosophies, to new worldview that maybe you've never had before. And I think it will help you to grow as a person. It certainly has for me when I have done that kind of reading.
Thank you, Mr. Shahi, for your very deeper understanding about the culture, very deeper understanding about different country. And I know how actually you, not only you and your family, travel a lot. And this is sometimes we think, oh, this man, how he make it possible with his family, and you doing a great jobs. And you are not only my friend. Always, I believe that you are like a philosopher, and you learn from the practical experience. Your family learned from practical experience. That is the objective of World Talent Economy Forum. We want to bring all of the talent people like you, and we want to know about your story, about the cultures, about the economical aspects, and many more things. That is the way we can enrich together. And definitely in the futures we will invite you other policy discussions and other group discussions, and we are arranging different kind of debate and other things. So by this way, definitely we can make a better ecosystem, which is very important right now for this world. Thank you for your valuable time and for your valuable discussions. And I think our audience really they learn a lot, and they are also come and they are saying that it's an excellent observation from I know. Yes. Thank you for your support, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sharif. Thank you for inviting me to be on. I really enjoyed it, and I hope I get to see you in person in not too long.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully, and send my regards to your family.
I will.
Okay, thank you.